When my stepsister and my fiancé found out that I was the original creator of the app that made us millions, they changed the code and called me just a pretty placeholder. My fiancé said she was lucky we let her tag along. 7 hours later, the code self-destructed. You forgot who built it. I'm Alina Crowley. I'm 31 now. Quiet, analytical, and a self-proclaimed introvert with a soft voice and a brain that never turns off. I grew up in Tacoma, Washington, the only child of a sweet, overworked mechanic and a librarian mom who taught me how to lose myself in books and code. When I was 16, my mom passed from a sudden stroke. My dad was shattered. A year later, he married Cheryl, his high school sweetheart from before my mom. I tried to be happy for him. I really did. Cheryl came with a daughter. Brielle. Same age as me, but we couldn't have been more different. She was the spotlight type, social, magnetic, all edges softened with charm. I was the tech nerd with smudged glasses and fingers that moved faster on a keyboard than they did in conversation. We were polite to each other for my dad's sake, but we weren't close. Time passed. I went off to the University of Washington, majored in computer science, did an internship at a tech incubator in Seattle. Brielle bounced around community college, dropped out, then got big into social media marketing. The kind of influencer light, always networking, personal brand hustle that made me cringe but somehow worked for her. Then came Bennett. I met him through mutual friends at a tech panel. He was charming, a bit smug, but smart. MBA student, great hair, great smile, said all the right things. I was flattered. Guys like him didn't usually notice women like me, not unless they wanted something. But he seemed different. He listened to me talk about ideas, stayed up with me while I pulled all-nighters working on early prototypes. He said he loved how my brain worked. I fell for him. Fast. Hard. A year into dating, I let him in on my passion project, an app called MatchSkill. I had been quietly building it since college. It was a platform that connected freelancers with short-term clients, but with a smart matching engine built on behavioral data and project outcomes. Think Tinder meets Upwork. Except cleaner, leaner, and genuinely useful. At first, it was just my thing. A quiet obsession I built in the evenings while working a junior dev job. But Bennett had ideas. He knew people. He could get us angel investors. Let me help you grow this, he said. It felt good to be believed in. So I let him in. A few months later, Brielle got involved. She came to one of our pitch meetings by accident and offered to help build our brand identity. I hesitated. She wasn't technical, but she was persuasive. We need polish, Bennett said. She knows how to sell this. I didn't argue. I was the tech. They were the shine. It became our dynamic. And for a while, it worked. We launched out of a co-working space in Capitol Hill. The user base grew, the app worked beautifully, and press started noticing us. Suddenly, the three of us were in articles, Forbes' top startups to watch, TechCrunch write-ups. Photos of us in front of laptops, coffee in hand, smiling at the camera like the perfect startup dream team. But behind the scenes? Things shifted. Quietly. My name started dropping lower in press releases. Brielle and Bennett were taking more meetings without me. I was working 12 to 14-hour days, maintaining the infrastructure, responding to bug reports, iterating on the matching algorithm that made the app what it was. They were schmoozing, smiling, making decisions. When I confronted Bennett once about it, he brushed it off. People don't need to know everything behind the curtain. You're the genius, babe. We're just the faces. You don't want all that attention, remember? And honestly? A part of me bought that. I've never liked the spotlight. But I also never liked being erased. It got worse the month we landed our first big investor, a venture capital firm in Palo Alto. The paperwork came back. My title was reduced from co-founder and CTO to lead developer. I brought it up. Bennett said it was a paperwork glitch and promised to fix it. He never did. The retreat in Lake Tahoe was supposed to be a celebration. A bonding weekend for the founding team. But the night I overheard them talking downstairs in the living room, sipping whiskey, and laughing about how they'd let me tag along, something snapped in me. I wasn't angry. I was clear. It was like a fog lifting. I realized just how deliberately I'd been used, placated, and slowly erased. They wanted the product. They wanted the credit. But they didn't want me. What they didn't know was that I had quietly built my own insurance policy into MatchSkill's codebase. Years ago, while building the algorithm, I created a proprietary architecture that depended entirely on a closed system only I had access to. Think of it like the spinal cord of the AI engine. It controlled data flow, behavior, and scaling logic. Without it, the app was just a pretty front end. I never told anyone about it. Not because I expected betrayal, but because I never trusted anyone enough to let them touch it. That night, while they drank and gloated, I accessed the mainframe from my laptop upstairs. I disabled the bridge that linked the app to the AI engine. 7 hours later, the app collapsed. User sessions froze. Freelancers couldn't log in. Clients saw gibberish in the dashboard. Matching stopped. Every alert system lit up. It looked like a cyber attack, but it wasn't. It was me. The fallout was immediate. You don't need to be a tech genius to understand what happens when a platform millions depend on suddenly dies. Especially when venture capitalists are involved. Especially when your name is on the press release that just ran in TechCrunch 3 days before. I didn't answer any of their calls that day. I didn't reply to the texts. There were a lot of them. First from Bennett. "Hey, something's wrong with the app. We're calling you in now." Then Brielle. "Are you seeing this? We need you. Can you fix it?" Then more panicked. "Alina, what the hell is going on? We're losing clients. Fix it now." I sat in my apartment, calm. There was rain outside, one of those slow, heavy spring rains that makes the whole world feel like it's thinking. I watched it slide down the window pane, laptop in my lap, coffee beside me. I'd already disabled all admin credentials and rerouted access through my own private node. There wasn't a single thing they could do without me. They tried everything, rebooting servers, pulling in backup devs, reaching out to consultants. But none of them could make sense of the app's architecture. Because I hadn't built it to be easily reverse-engineered. It was mine. I had poured every inch of my mind into that codebase. Not just as a technician, but as a creator. When Brielle showed up outside my apartment 2 days later, I didn't answer the door. She stood there, in heels and that same corporate blazer she wore to every investor meeting, holding her phone like she was about to throw it. I could hear her through the door. "This is wreck. You're going to destroy everything we worked for. Don't be stupid." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. A few hours after that, I received a message, not from Bennett or Brielle, but from Derek Marsden, the lead partner from the VC firm. It was short. "We need to talk. You're the only one who understands how the system works." That was the first time I felt something shift in my chest. Not pride. Not satisfaction. Something colder. Like vindication, but edged with grief. I'd wanted to build something good. Something helpful. I didn't build it to become someone's pawn or credit line. And now the people who tried to cut me out of it were the ones crawling back. I agreed to meet, on my terms. In a public setting. I chose a quiet little cafe in Bellevue where the baristas know me and don't ask questions. Derek showed up in a Patagonia jacket and with the stiff, performative smile of a man who spends most of his time calculating ROI. He didn't waste time. "You own the architecture." I nodded. "You wrecked your own product." "I secured my work," I replied. "After unauthorized changes were made and my access was revoked." He didn't argue. That told me everything I needed to know. "What do you want?" he asked. That question hung in the air between us. What did I want? I could have said I wanted them gone. That I wanted full control. I could have demanded public credit, reinstated titles, legal action. But the truth? I didn't want to be in the room with them again. I didn't want to spend another minute negotiating power with people who looked at me like a piece of furniture. I wanted out. With what I was owed. So I told him what I wanted, a full buyout of my original equity at the pre-crash valuation. My name removed from all public-facing documents. A formal written acknowledgement of my role in the creation and foundation of the platform. And most importantly, I wanted MatchScale handed back to me in full IP, so I could decide what to do with it. Whether to dispatch it entirely, or rebuild it the way it was meant to be. He stared at me. That'll cost us. I shrugged. Then walk. It took them 2 days to respond. When they did, it came with paperwork, legal signatures, and silence. No apologies. No explanations. But that was fine by me. I didn't need an apology from Bennett. Not after everything. Not after I found out, weeks later, that they'd been sleeping together for months before they locked me out. I wasn't even angry at that point. Just done. They had each other, and now, they had nothing else. I had my freedom, my finances, and most importantly, my name and my dignity. After the deal was finalized, I signed away my rights to MatchScale, the brand name, not the core system. They could keep their logo, the domain, the hollowed-out shell of what used to be something powerful. What I retained was far more valuable: the architecture, the engine, the bones beneath the skin. I'd built it under my own license before the business was incorporated. I'd written the code in my bedroom, long before there was a startup. It had always been mine. They could try to imitate it. But it was like trying to recreate a body without a heart. They wouldn't get it running again. And deep down, I think they knew that. Word got around fast in the Seattle tech community. People whispered. Some asked questions in DMs, others made assumptions. Bennett and Brielle started a small PR campaign to control the narrative. Phrases like co-founder conflict and creative differences started showing up in statements. But people weren't stupid. Investors talk. Devs talk more. The whispers turned into side glances. Recruiters started sliding into my inbox, asking if I was open to consulting. Founders I'd barely known back in school were now asking to meet for coffee, to pick my brain. I took a few of those meetings. Just enough to remind myself that I wasn't invisible. But mostly, I stayed home. For the first time in years, I had quiet. I could breathe again. That first week of silence, I slept more than I had in months. I cooked for myself. I walked through Point Defiance Park with a thermos of coffee. I let my brain unravel, bit by bit, until the knots started to loosen. But the emotions came in waves. Not anger, not anymore, just this heavy sadness, like grief. Because I had trusted them. I had wanted to build something together. I had made room for people I thought cared about me, only to be used and discarded like I didn't matter. It wasn't just business. It was personal. It was always personal. And then there was the worst part, having to explain it to my dad. He adored Bennett. Thought we were on track to get married. He even once called Brielle and me his dream teen girls. The idea that both of them could hurt me like that? It broke something in him. When I told him what had happened, really told him, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he got up and left the room. That night, he called Cheryl and asked her not to bring Brielle around for a while. I didn't ask what she said. They're still together. Barely. He sees me often, takes me to lunch once a week like clockwork. But there's a sadness in his eyes I've never seen before. Like he's carrying part of my betrayal inside him, trying to find a way to make sense of it. I told him it's not his fault. And I meant it. Still, I miss who we used to be as a family, even if that version of us was built on something fragile. A month later, I started writing again. Not code, at least not yet. Just journaling. Filling up notebooks with ideas, reflections, sketches of platforms I might want to build someday. I even started outlining a new version of Match Skill, something cleaner, stripped down, ethical, focused on micro-communities rather than mass scale. Nothing concrete yet. Just ideas. But it felt good to think like a builder again. Without the weight of eyes on me. Without people hovering, waiting to take credit. I got an email from Brielle. Just one line. You got what you wanted. I hope you're happy. I didn't reply. Because what I wanted wasn't money. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even recognition. What I wanted was respect. What I wanted was honesty. What I wanted was a seat at the table without having to fight to prove I belonged there. And that's what they never understood. Bennett didn't contact me for weeks after the app went dark. Not directly, at least. Instead, I'd get messages through other people. A mutual friend from our pitch days saying he seemed wrecked. A tech blogger I barely knew DM'd me to say Bennett had lost control of the company during a call with new investors. Someone even claimed he cried in a meeting, but I didn't let myself feel anything when I heard it. I didn't know if it was true, and more importantly, I didn't care. There's a specific kind of emotional exhaustion that comes from being betrayed by someone you once saw a future with. It's not like heartbreak from a bad breakup, or disappointment from a failed project. It's deeper. Quieter. It follows you around in your routines. Like how I'd go to refill my tea and automatically reach for a second mug, then remember. Or how I'd catch myself rewriting code late at night and start explaining something aloud, only to realize there was no one on the other end of the conversation anymore. The silence wasn't peaceful at first. It was cruel. It made space for thoughts I didn't want to have. What did I miss? What did I ignore? Why did I trust them? When did I start assuming that needing people meant they had to take something from me? But slowly, I started reclaiming my space. I redecorated my apartment. Took down the framed team photos from our launch party. Deleted the interview clip where I sat between Brielle and Bennett, nodding silently while they talked over me. I unfollowed them both on every platform, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I started walking longer. I'd leave my phone at home and wander Seattle's backstreets. Capitol Hill. Fremont. Queen Anne. I liked seeing strangers' lives through their windows, books stacked near couches, warm lighting spilling onto sidewalks, the occasional cat watching from a sill. It reminded me that other lives were happening. That mine could be more than code and betrayal. And eventually, I allowed myself to start imagining again. Not just the version of Match Skill I wanted to build, but other things, too. A mentorship program for women developers just starting out. A podcast, maybe. Or just something small, like writing out stories about what I'd learned, what I wished someone had told me back when I was 21 and too eager to be valuable. One day, I was sitting at my favorite coffee spot near Green Lake, reading through old code journals, when I felt a presence in front of me. I looked up. It was Bennett. He looked thinner. Like someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. He was wearing the same coat he used to wear to our first investor meetings, except now it didn't sit on him the same way. His posture had changed. Less cocky. More defeated. "Hi," he said, voice lower than I remembered. I didn't say anything. He asked if he could sit. I hesitated, then nodded, mostly out of curiosity, not forgiveness. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he started, his eyes not quite meeting mine. I wanted to say I messed up. I didn't answer. He kept talking. Said he let things spiral. Said Brielle had pushed certain changes, and he didn't want to cause friction. That he thought we'd fix it all later. That he never meant to push me out. That he didn't think I'd walk. I let him talk. I didn't interrupt once. Because I knew none of this was for me, it was for him. He needed to unburden, to explain, to confess. When he finally stopped, he asked, "Are you okay?" That part almost made me laugh. Not in a cruel way, just a kind of sad amusement. I told him yes. I was okay. And I was. Mostly. He nodded. You were always the smartest person in the room. I just didn't know how to handle that. And with that, he stood up and left. I didn't stop him. There was nothing else to say. Later that night, I wrote about it in my journal. Not as some great moment of closure. Not as a scene to wrap things up neatly. But just as another detail. Another lesson. Because that's what this had all become. A long, painful, infuriating, and clarifying lesson in self-worth, boundaries, and trust. Not everyone who believes in you is rooting for you. Not everyone who smiles is safe. Not everyone who loves you will protect what you've built. But sometimes, that loss carves out space you didn't know you needed. Space to breathe. To rebuild. To stop just surviving and start actually choosing. And I was finally choosing. It took me about 8 months to feel like myself again. Not the old me, the one who second-guessed every decision, who shrunk herself to avoid conflict, who let other people speak louder in rooms she helped build, but a better version. One who didn't apologize for being the quietest person in the room because now, I understood that being quiet didn't mean being weak. And it definitely didn't mean being blind. During those months, I rebuilt. Not match skill exactly. I let that brand name die the slow death it deserved. But I rebuilt the engine. Cleaned it up. Made it leaner, more ethical, more powerful. And I gave it a new face. A better name. True Match. I built it from the ground up on my own terms. No co-founders. No branding consultants with sugary fake pitches. Just me, a small team of hand-picked developers I'd met through underground women in tech circles, and a few freelance UX designers who respected the mission. Every single one of them knew the backstory. Every one of them signed fair, clear contracts. This time I wasn't going to be erased. We launched quietly. No press run. No hype. Just word of mouth and an invite-only beta. And it spread like wildfire. Because here's the thing, when you strip ego and greed out of a product, and you design it with real users in mind, people notice. Freelancers loved it. Clients loved it more. We integrated peer reviews, instant micro-consulting modules, transparent fees. No vague algorithms. No arbitrary account freezes. Just clean, accountable tech. Within 4 months, we had over 60,000 active users. Bigger platforms took notice. Including MatchSkill, which was still stumbling forward like a zombie, kept alive by a dwindling user base and a half-baked development team scrambling to understand code they never built. I wasn't trying to compete. But they made it one the second they realized what True Match was. One of our mutual friends sent me a screenshot from MatchSkill's internal Slack. It was a panic thread. Someone had figured out that True Match's core system was eerily similar to MatchSkill's original version. That the matchmaking logic, even with a new face, felt like Alina's touch. That phrase made me smile. Then came the real revenge. And I didn't have to lift a finger. People started leaving MatchSkill. Slowly at first. Then rapidly. Freelancers jumped ship, clients followed. Their investor board, what was left of it, put out desperate feelers for acquisition options. But by then, the damage was irreversible. And then I got the email. It was from Brielle. Subject line, "Let's talk." The body was polite. Cold. Too formal for someone who once shared my bathroom sink. She wanted to discuss a mutually beneficial opportunity. Apparently, she and Bennett had a plan. To merge MatchSkill's remaining user base with TrueMatch in exchange for partial equity. She even included a 3-slide mock-up pitch deck as if this was some college project. I stared at the email for a long time. Then I wrote back 3 words, not interested. Thanks. I sent it, closed my laptop, and made myself a cup of tea. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The final satisfying twist came 3 weeks later. One of MatchSkill's early investors, someone who had believed in me, reached out. He jumped ship when the company started sinking and said he'd been quietly watching TrueMatch's growth. He offered to help secure a feature spot in an upcoming Seattle tech conference. A spotlight slot. The kind they give to rising stars. I said yes. At the event, I stepped onto the stage, not as a placeholder, not as a tag-along, not as someone else let in, but as the founder. The applause was loud. But more than that, it was real. Afterward, I walked out into the reception hall, drink in hand, and I saw them. Bennett and Brielle, standing by the wall near the exit, watching me. They didn't come over. They didn't smile. They just stood there, the 2 people who once tried to erase me, now forced to watch me succeed without them. Watching me thrive in the space they tried to take from me. And that was the most satisfying revenge I could have asked for. Not cruel. Not dramatic. Just quiet, undeniable proof that they were wrong. They called me a placeholder. Now they're the footnote.